Back. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to the Hot Mic Podcast. Nathan the Barbarian with you. Welcome back. It's about to get hot in here. Thank you for being here. We got two crew members. We're still waiting to join us. They got business. Very, very busy people. Raven Mundy and Kevin, the voice of
I
reason.
can I can play either of them. I know the rhetoric.
Oh, you can
It's
do
no big
both,
deal.
huh? Okay.
Oh
A man,
yeah, for
a man of
sure.
many talents, huh?
Oh, what's this? Come on, I've been on this show for a while. I've been around the block a few times, if you know what I mean.
Okay. Okay. I do know what you mean. Yeah.
All right, all
Well,
right.
he needs no introduction. We call him Sexy Phil. Most of the world knows him as Phil Heimlich. How you doing, sir?
Very good, sir. And I want to thank you, Nathan, for your choice of topics that you sent around. I am just aching to talk about that killer squirrel. I mean, what that is on everybody's minds. Let's face it.
Yeah, yeah, I figure, everything's so heavy. Sometimes you got to lighten it up a little bit. So,
Well, it's lighting up unless you're the one that gets attacked by the squirrel.
exactly.
Then we'll
It's
see how
funny.
you feel.
Exactly. We might start with that actually as we wait for the rest of the crew to join us and then we get to more serious matters. But I got to say what's up to Troy, aka or Tarris, aka Troy Horton. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing well, man. Feeling good. I've been playing a lot of pickleball. Been excited about today, coming to hang out with the fellas and powwow and getting some hot topics discussed.
Yeah, if
Absolutely.
I could just ask Tarris, the only thing request to make is please today don't interrupt me, okay?
With the jokes, with the jokes. Since you brought it up, so we're still waiting for Kevin. We're still waiting for Raven. They'll join us hopefully very, very soon. But somebody posted this in a Facebook group. And I just thought it was interesting about a vicious squirrel attack. Let me actually start there. We wait for everybody else to join. Kind of lighten the mood since you already let the cat out of the bag, so to speak. I just thought it
Well,
was
I was so
interesting.
wired up. It's a let's face it, it's a topic that people all over the country are talking about. Well,
And
maybe
if
all
they're
over the
not,
county where it happened, but anyway, go ahead.
And if they're not, they should be. This happened in California, actually. Apparently, there was some somebody put this up. Apparently, there is some very aggressive squirrels that attacked some people in the neighborhood. Two people had to
Mhm.
seek medical attention following a vicious squirrel attack. And I was like wondering to myself, like, what is behind this? Is there some political motivation or the squirrels? I don't know. Are they rallying up now? I mean, what's going on with this? You ever
Well,
had close encounters of a squirrel kind?
Nathan, only you could find some political meeting in a squirrel.
I'm stretching it to be sure,
tell
but
tell us about it. Yeah.
yeah, I've got some squirrel. We have squirrels outside of our house every single day. My wife feeds them. It's hilarious, man. My wife she feeds them. She names them. We got a squirrel named Henry that when we have
Delivered by
our
Neuromod devices.
sorry about that.
oh, that's all right. I
Sorry
mean, every time we put pumpkins out, Henry takes a bite out of the pumpkins. I mean, like, I can see it. I can see a squirrel. And matter of fact, and I got it on video that I recorded out of my glasses. There was a squirrel that tried to crawl up my gutter today and didn't make it. So his other squirrel friend was out there crying for him and it didn't make it. And I was trying to get my dog to console him. I mean, I got it all on video. It's so squirrel.
What was the squirrel a Trump supporter, as far as you know,
I,
Terrence?
I didn't get that far. I mean, if he
No,
was
I
in
know
my
that's
yard,
kind of free. That's kind of a bar, kind of a guideline, prerequisite for you, or your associates. That's why I ask.
not for real. The squirrel comes over. Yeah, they every time
sorry
somebody
about
puts
that. My son about 2 weeks ago was outside the house and he was trying to catch a squirrel, and I told him, I was like, son, I don't think you really want to do that. I think it sounds like a good idea, but you really don't want to do that. And
my
I
wife.
remember when I was a kid, I used to climb trees. The good old days when kids was climbing trees and breaking their arm and falling off of fences and falling out of swing sets. But I tried to when I was younger. My grandfather told me the same thing that I just told my son, which is I don't think you really want to do that. Really a good idea.
My wife feed it
Um,
squirrels, and then it brought a skunk, and I was
Ooh.
like, yeah, I mean that's real. So man, my wife was leaving peanuts out there on. I'm telling you, she was leaving peanuts on the porch for the squirrels, and they were in
Oh,
heaven. Yeah, I was like, honey, you can't do that because there was a squirrel. Then a skunk showed up on our porch, and I was like, that was it. I said, no more.
it's just something about the image that it's like the squirrel was like WWE. The squirrel was jumping off the top. It's something about it. Just I thought that it just tickled me for whatever reason. And I'm like, maybe there's something going on with the homeowners association or something like that. The squirrels are rising up in the neighborhood. I don't know. It could just be the crazy times that we live in. I'm not really sure. But I thought it was interesting nonetheless. But to the audience, thank you for being here. We appreciate it. Colleen writes, they have white squirrels in Norwood. Oh boy, here we go. Here we go. Here we go. It's just there's a lot of animals you want to leave alone. I would put squirrels near the top of the list. That's not something you really want to mess with. But forget about the squirrels. I want to talk about, and we haven't talked about this since it happened. It really happened 2 weeks
All
ago.
I can say is, please, no more food trucks.
No more
Please.
food trucks.
Can we move on, please?
We can move on for sure.
Thank you.
I want to talk about Charlie Kirk in relationship to the NFL. And oh, by the way, the Bengals do not need a head coaching change. They don't need a head coaching change. We're good where we are right now. Ups and downs of being an NFL team. But 2 weeks ago, you had all but 4 teams that honored Charlie Kirk. I believe it was, I'm not sure when it was. I believe it was before the game started. And there was a lot of uproar about it, you know. And the 4 teams, and one of those teams included the Cincinnati Bengals. They did not do a tribute to Charlie Kirk. And people online, I saw it, they were like targeting them, like they had did something wrong. And it took me back to when we were having a national conversation about Colin Kaepernick. And people were like, you know what? Let's keep politics and sports separate. And I thought, yeah, I can see that, you know. Especially these days and times when I'm turning into the football game, I don't really want to deal with politics. In fact, I'm trying to escape it. I'm trying to get away from it. But I want to get the crew's opinion about that. Is this different with Charlie Kirk? Is this similar to what happened with Colin Kaepernick when so many people were saying, hey, don't take a knee during a game. This is about sports, not about politics. Is this different with Charlie Kirk? What's your take on it?
I want to go, but Phil, you going to interrupt me?
Tarris, would I do that? Come
Okay.
on.
I'm just making sure.
I
believe the comparison to Colin Kaepernick, I believe this has more of a spiritual element to it, the Charlie Kirk thing, because they're really riding the spiritual thing with it. It was more of a racial divide with Colin Kaepernick because that was the first time, you know, somebody black stood on something for real. You know, the first time somebody was like, you know, in our modern day, took a stance to where it was a big enough stance to, you know, get him canceled from the NFL. But with this, I believe that this has more of a spiritual rim to it. So where a lot of people are using this as like a great awakening of the spirituality. So that's where I think that they're going to use it more in a political play. I don't think that the Bengals had any obligation to or not do it. I mean, you know, like the past couple of weeks, I know I didn't get a chance. I wasn't on the podcast when you guys were talking about the Charlie Kirk thing, but I've seen the Republican Party and the people on the far right, the MAGAs, do some really, really bad stuff the past couple of weeks. You know, they said they're saying, well, we didn't riot in the streets when we didn't cause that either. I mean, there was powers that be behind that. But I've seen them do some really, really, really bad stuff and hide behind Christianity even more. So like bringing in the NFL and the separation between the sports and the politics and religion, I think in the world that we live in now, it's all intertwined, all of it.
What do you think, Phil?
I'm glad those 4 teams didn't do it, and I don't really respect the others that did. You know, you can on the one hand say that what happened to him was terrible, and pray for his family, and this and that, but that's different from making him kind of a hero like he's Martin Luther King. Because with all due respect, and again, I know he's passed away, this guy was no Martin Luther King. I mean, he said, and you know, I know he talked about his faith, and I respect that, but much of what he said and how he said it was not very Christ-like. Attacking, saying Martin Luther King was awful, they shouldn't have passed the Civil Rights Act, and those kind of comments, those flip comments about, oh well, I got on a plane and it was a black pilot, so I was a little concerned because he probably only got that job because of his race. I mean, very, I would say, insensitive. The best I could say, insensitive comments, and I think that what these NFL teams that honored him did, they just went along with it. They went along with it. And I saw a text chain from one of my Bible study groups yesterday, and they were talking about how wonderful the service was and God's using Turning Point and this and that. Well, I wonder how many people who are saying that have actually read or listened to what he said, because I don't believe what he said was a positive message. And probably the most insightful thing I've heard about him was it was on I think the Steve Schmidt podcast. I can't remember who was talking, but what they said is this guy was in his 30s, and hopefully, had he lived, he would have kind of grown into a mature leader, a real leader. And you say he's in his 30s. I think most of us would say, I certainly would, that I did some stupid things and said some stupid things in my 30s. And I think had he lived and really lived out his faith, then he would have hopefully have matured. But do I think he is worthy of this kind of attention? No, I don't. Based on what he said and did, I do not think so. He was an election denier. Went along with the Trump's efforts from what I understand, to overturn the election. These, to me, these are not the acts of somebody who I think is acting in a godly manner.
I didn't realize it until after his tragic passing, but I actually consumed quite a lot of his podcast and didn't realize it until I was looking back. I listen to and watch all the podcasts, a lot of them, and I especially in these days and times keep my eyes on a lot of right wing or right leaning podcasts so I can kind of get a sense of what people feel like that have a different opinion of me. And what I think is so ironic about Charlie Kirk is, and I agree with a lot of your assessments, Phil. I mean, I understand what you're saying. A lot of people have said the same thing. But the one thing that I think is consistent about him is that he was pro free speech. He said he didn't believe in hate speech. Now, people can take that the way they want to, and I respect that. But now we have people losing their jobs for exercising free speech when Charlie Kirk, again, I didn't know the man, but just based upon, watching his videos and what I gather from him, he would have been against that.
Well,
So it's
just
like,
to follow up, Nathan, real quick, I just heard something on the news where his organization, Turning Point, like today, issued a statement basically criticizing Disney and ABC for putting Jimmy Kimmel back on the air.
yeah, we'll get to
And
that.
yeah, assuming we would hope he would be consistent, but just remember, Brendan Carr is also on record from talking about how important it is for free speech not to censor, for the government not to censor people. So unfortunately, these folks have a little, they're a little challenged consistency wise.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lack of consistency, and so it's like now that he's passed away and he can't speak for himself, you got other people speaking for him, and it just doesn't seem to be consistent with what he stood for. How, on one hand, can you say he stood for free speech, and then people lose their jobs because they exercise their free speech? Now, we all know employers, hey, that's what they can do, but it just seems to be the opposite of what he stood for. Is it
So that's
just
what
me that looks that way?
no, that's what I was talking about earlier about the people on the far right. I've seen do some really bad stuff here the past couple of weeks. I mean, like when that stuff came out, I seen even on the local level people canceling people like the Lucius Q guy, Aaron Sharp. They went hard because it hurt them. So hurt people. They lashed out at anybody that said anything negative about Charlie Kirk. They lashed out at him. But I'll challenge everyone. I've been following Charlie Kirk and Candace Owens since 2018. So y'all have heard me mention Candace Owens on this show a few times, and y'all like, oh well, she's it. But they were together up until 2 years ago, and they had a falling out over Israel. Charlie was going one way, Candace was going another way. So they fell out. They tried to cancel Candace. Candace shook it off like Candace does, came out with her own show, and started doing her own content and breaking away because they wanted Candace Owens, vice president, Charlie Kirk, president. That's what they wanted. They were grooming them for years down the road. Candace bucked it. Like, no, I'm not. So she went her way and she started doing her own thing, got married, started having kids, doing that thing. But I challenge everybody to look, where is Candace now? What is she saying? That's the person who was closest to Charlie Kirk from the beginning of Turning Point. That's why I found out about them, because the whole Blexit thing, because she was a part of the Blexit movement. She was the Blexit. He was the turning point. So Blexit was black exit from the Democratic Party. And that's whatever I started following in 2019 and followed them from 2019 until now. So the people, just like everything else, are capitalizing on it. And I've had to go to my pastor, man, on this one. Because I was like, man, I'm seeing people use Christianity and faith in a way that I've never seen for political grandstanding opportunities. And he reminded me, he said, take it to the cross and forgive. But if it brings people to the cross and people are going to be coming and we're going to be getting some souls and salvations coming from it, that's where I stand with the whole thing with it. And I hope that we can move forward. And because when I watched his service, his wife's message and Marco Rubio's message stood out to me the most, because they said, if we can use his death, no matter how it comes out, to bring people back into salvation, then that's what it's for.
I have a couple. Can I make a couple more comments about this?
Sure. Go right ahead.
Well, couple points. And there was a big difference between what his wife said a few days ago versus what she said yesterday at the service. And I don't fault somebody just when their husband's just passed away, but what really, really has troubled me is the comments by so many political figures in my party, the Republican Party, claiming it's always they tried to kill him. They tried to do this. That is, pardon me, pure bullshit. This guy acted by himself. Okay. And to ascribe, as Vance and Trump and these others have, to ascribe that to the left is so disingenuous. It's just so dishonest. It's one crazy guy. And they are using this to attack their political opponents. I mean, that is disgusting. It is outright disgusting. And I think the most memorable, I didn't watch it, but I've read about it, of that service. The next to last speaker is his wife, who, to her credit, really lived out her faith and said, I forgive this person. I forgive him. And I give her credit for saying, this is the kind of person my husband wanted to reach. Again, different from what she said after. But then Donald Trump gets up and he goes, I just want to say, maybe you, Charlie, doesn't agree with me on this. I hate my enemies and I don't want any good for them. I mean, I wonder what the reaction of that crowd was. They were supposed to be a faith-filled, kind of Christ-centered thing. And this guy gets up and says something that is about as opposite from what the Bible and Christ taught than anything you can imagine.
Yeah, I saw that as well. Kevin's with us. How you doing, Kevin? Can you hear us?
Good. Yes, all sir. Right. Good to see
you.
Yeah,
we started the show talking about, football. It was 4 football home teams that decided.
Well, we did talk about the deadly squirrels,
we did talk about the deadly squirrel.
Yeah,
right?
That was so critical, so important.
Phil brought it up first, so I figured it was a great segue. We're talking about the 4 NFL teams, including the Bengals, that did not do a service for Charlie Kirk, and then kind of talking about Charlie Kirk, and just making an observation that it just seems like a lot of people on the right are using his death and talking about him in a way that wasn't consistent to what he lived to. In a very ironic way, it wasn't intentional. This show and what Charlie Kirk talked about are very similar. He believed in debate with people who had divergent points of view. I used to watch his debates all the time. He went on Gavin Newsom's show. I think he was Gavin Newsom's first guest on his podcast. I watched the entire thing and thought it was very, very interesting. And it's like that's being lost in some of this. And then Tarris made an interesting point. He said, hurt people. I think that's at the root of it. A lot of people are hurting, so now they want to hurt other people. But so what do you think about the 4 NFL teams that decided to not do a tribute for Charlie Kirk, or the other 37 or 27 teams that decided to do it? What's your take on that?
Well, I think each team, as each individual American, has the right to acknowledge his death in whatever way is appropriate. Like, I don't think the fact that they didn't do anything was disrespectful to Charlie Kirk. I think they made a decision that this was not something that they wanted to get into with their fan base or enter into the politics of it. Look, here's the one thing that you got to acknowledge about Charlie Kirk. Charlie Kirk was a polarizing figure. He was he was beloved on the right, but he was not a national hero. I mean, I think despite whatever MAGA and the right would like to try to paint him, he's not in the same vein as a Martin Luther King or a JFK or a Robert Kennedy. He's not that, you know, and I don't say that disrespectfully. I just simply say that because when you talk about those folks, politics aside, they were not particularly polarizing figures in the same way that Charlie Kirk was. Okay. And so when you have sort of these national moments of silence, that usually those types of things are reserved for, you know, those types of national heroes. Now, I mean, I'm not going to say anything against anybody who did do it. If they thought that was appropriate, that was in their right to do it. But I don't think we should be villainizing anybody that didn't do it, because in my opinion, Charlie Kirk is not along the same lines of some of the national heroes. He was a hero on the right, no question about that, and they loved him, and they're entitled to feel that way about him. But I think when you're talking about national American heroes, and people who are revered by Americans regardless of their political party, Charlie Kirk was not that, and we need to quit pretending that he was.
Well, let me push back just a little bit. So who decides if Charlie Kirk is a national hero or not?
I think the response from the people is that. I mean, there's a clear division across this country about who Charlie Kirk is and the level of respect that people have for them. I mean, you may not love Martin Luther King, but I think it's broadly and widely regarded that he is one of the most respected and impactful Americans in the history. I think, you know, you could look at JFK. He was a president of the United States. I mean, we can go down the line of, you know, Ronald Reagan. I mean, Republican or Democrat, I think there are certain individuals that people look at and that there is broad consensus that, like, this is a national hero. This is somebody who's deserved of the respect and admiration of the entire country, right? Like they're figures that we generally regard in that. I think Abraham Lincoln would be somebody that you would hold in that regard. To speak of Charlie Kirk in the same breath of any of those folks that I just named is not, again, no disrespect to him and those who love him and what he did, but that's like comparing me to, you know, name somebody who you know has won at the highest levels of journalism with Pulitzer. I mean, there's just got to be an acknowledgement that some people are not on other people's level, and Charlie Kirk, just quite frankly, is not on the level of some of these national figures that, you know, some on the right want to compare him to, and they're entitled to feel that way. But I think generally the broad consensus of the country is usually what determines it.
But there are some people with imagery, because everybody you named, I saw on one particular. It was funny that you named all those people. I saw Abraham Lincoln, Ronald Reagan, Martin Luther King Jr., John F. Kennedy, Charlie Kirk, and White Jesus, all on one picture, and that's floating around in white nationalist, white Christian nationalist world. That's what's going. That's what's floating around. They're martyring him out, because in our lifetime, I don't think that any of their leaders have been hit. You know, since the 60s, we've lost Black Panther leaders, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, you know, like significant people in the community that were fighting for change, you know, and this is the first time, whether we like it or not, in my opinion, that one of their leaders or one of their potential prophets got hit. You know, and whether you like him or not, he was speaking that white nationalist rhetoric.
Yeah, but they spread the lie that all the violence is coming from the left, which is totally false. It ignores the January 6th thing. It ignores what happened to Pelosi's husband. Ignores those Minnesota legislators who were murdered. It's a pure lie. Okay, to say, oh, it's all coming from here, anyway, particularly because. I don't know if you guys know this, but after Pelosi's, Donald Trump can play it every way, both ways. After Pelosi's husband was almost murdered, you might remember, Trump was making jokes about it at his rallies. He was saying, "Oh, I guess it's too bad he just didn't have a wall to protect him." He made jokes about it. I mean, so this whole thing that the violence is only coming from the left. Frankly, if you have to compare, probably more's come from the right. But it's such a terrible and misleading thing to say.
I also think it's not a productive or helpful thing to say. Like, and I've made this point that this is where the unhealthiness of politics come in. Instead of debating about who it's worse among, conservatives or Republicans, I think ignores the fact that most of these folks who perpetrate these crimes are not a friend to either party, are not a friend to democracy, or not.
Well, they're just nuts.
Yeah, well, I mean, whether you want to say it's mental illness or just, pure unadulterated evil, because sometimes that's the case. Sometimes people aren't sick in terms of mental health. Sometimes just people have ill intentions and want to do really bad things and just see the country burn. There are people like that. I'm not saying that that's the case in this shooter situation, but I think sometimes we're quick to throw the mental illness card on people and not recognizing that sometimes there are just some really evil people out there who have ill intent and don't mean anything good for this country. They want to burn it down. They want to restart the whole thing. And there are a whole lot of people out there that are like that. But I think when we devolve into this conversation about who's worse, the left or the right, it misses the point that these people who do these types of violence aren't a friend to democracy, regardless of which side of the aisle that they're on. And we can't get looped into this conversation about which side is worse. It's all bad. And we all need to speak out against it. And we need to quit trying to politicize these things. It's what stops us from being able to speak with one voice about how horrible these incidents actually are, because it becomes another tribal argument about which side is worse. And I think that's just another distraction.
Well, I mean, shouldn't we have those conversations about which side is worth as voters? When you're trying to decide who is better for you or worse for you in terms of your vote. I mean, I think it's like a natural thing to do when you're talking about politics, right?
But what Vance and others were doing was before this guy was even identified as the shooter, but they didn't even know. They were claiming this was they. I guess that means the liberals, the Democrats. They did this. They tried to. They were saying stuff. They tried to kill Charlie, but they're not going to get away with it.
Even the governor of Utah said we were hoping and praying it wasn't one of our own. He said that came out of his
more reasonable and honest, whereas the people like Trump and Vance, all they wanted to do was use this thing for political purposes.
Yeah, but I think that was just as. I don't think there was anything reasonable about what the governor of Utah said. I mean, actually, when you break it down,
at least early
very
on,
dangerous.
I thought he tried to. I did not see him scapegoating all the liberals, Democrats, or whatever in his comments. Nancy Mason, people like that are running for office. All the Democrats have blood on their hands before they even know who did it. These kind of comments are so reckless.
He tried to scapegoat immigrants, if I believe. He tried to scapegoat immigrants in that speech. He was like, I was hoping it wasn't somebody from Utah, hoping it wasn't one of us. I was hoping it was an immigrant. I'm like, bruh.
Well, I think what he was saying there was he didn't want that to be used against that particular group or against people in that state. I think that's what he was saying.
Yeah, but in doing so, he was not so subtly almost targeting, the other, right? The people who aren't like him or aren't from Utah, which to me I think was subtly just as dangerous. Well, no. It was subtly dangerous, but not as dangerous as you said, Phil, as what we hear coming from, the VP right now. I thought it was just wrong. It's like, these are the same people who were like, let's not exploit tragedy. And then Charlie Kirk is tragically taken away, and then they exploit the tragedy for their own politics. And I'm like, this is wrong. I don't care what side of the aisle you're on, but this man has just lost his life. And here you are up here trying to turn it into some type of political wedge. I just think it's wrong.
Well, it's as I always say, the essence of politics is hypocrisy. That is what it is. It's like politicians and those who delve in that realm always vilify when the other side does something, but don't see it when they do the exact same thing. And so it should be a surprise to no one, especially that our president and others around him have tried to politicize this incident for it. And it's sad because it actually takes away from, you know, the opportunity to truly deal with the tragedy of what happens, because we spend a whole lot of time sort of parsing through the politics of the situation. I mean, what the Utah governor said it might have been an honest moment, but it was a bad thing for him to say on that stage, because look, I mean, I'm gonna just be honest. It's not anything uncommon to what we do, because if something happens, as a black person, one of the first things I say is I hope nobody black did that, because you know what comes along with.
But isn't that what he was saying?
No, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. I'm saying it was probably a natural, honest thing, but for somebody in his position, it wasn't the appropriate thing to say at that time. You don't have to say everything you think. There are a lot of things that I think that I don't say on this program for good, for good reasons.
Well, you say them to me in person, so what's the difference?
Yes, absolutely. I'll say whatever do you feel, but I mean, but that's just good common sense. Like, there's just some things that you don't put out for public consumption, and that's why that was a bad. Even if it was an honest moment for him, it was not an appropriate thing to say. I thought the rest of his comments were spot on, and I thought he did.
That's what I was saying. Yeah.
Yeah, he did a really great job of trying to turn down the temperature, but that was a piece where you can undo an entirely great speech with a bad line where people.
I was listening to on podcast. You guys probably heard this, but what Robert F. Kennedy said to that crowd. It was in Indianapolis, a crowd the night that day Martin Luther King was killed. And I mean, I was always kind of a fan of Robert F. Kennedy for a lot. The father, not the one we have now. But if you listen to that, you can play it. It's on you can play it. It was nothing like what we heard about Charlie Kirk. There was no, this is the right-wing people. There they go. They killed him. No, he just stood there and comforted people. That's what he did. And boy, what a contrast between you listen to that and what we heard from people after the Kirk killing.
Let me jump in here and make a point about it's a good point too. What we're witnessing is unqualified person in office. We always hear all the time, we got to drain the swamp. We got to drain the swamp. We got to drain the swamp. But here we have a vice president who was a one term and didn't even do a full term as a senator, first time elected. And then he's hoisted into the vice presidency. And in my opinion, I'm sitting back as a Republican watching him fumble the chance of a lifetime. But instead, he's raising the river and cats and dogs and accusing and taking the race baiting war instead of trying to really do something to heal our nation. So in my opinion, we're watching in real time inexperience in government. We have an inexperienced vice president. He has never ran a government. I mean,
you really think it's experience? Don't you think people? There are people who are saying this kind of stuff that've been in office a fair amount of time. Tarris, do you really think it's his inexperience, or just frankly his selfish political ambition playing to his base?
If he would have started off like maybe saying in city politics and then worked his way up to state representative and then worked his way up into Congress and stuff like that, he would have learned and understood what it's like to be a civil servant, to be a person of the community. But he bought his way into the Senate and was exalted in the way of the White House. And that's what we're getting, in my opinion. Inexperience. Someone who doesn't know how to work through and be diplomatic. Someone who knows I'll just say for example, Governor Andy Beshear. I do not like that guy, but during COVID, he worked everybody in Kentucky loved him because of the way he handled COVID. And what we're witnessing in real time is inexperience in leadership. I know it's good to drain the swamp sometimes, but it'd be good to have some stability of someone with a cooler head. We would like to have somebody who's been in government, been a governor, been somebody like who's making these decisions in critical times and pivotal times in our country right now.
Well, just to clarify, are you talking about J.D. Vance or Donald Trump?
I'm talking about J.D. Vance.
But they both said the same. They both said the same thing.
They both said the same thing.
Blamed it on the left.
Yeah, they both said the same thing. Go ahead, Terry.
Yeah, because I'm talking about J.D. Vance more directly,
But there was no difference between what he and Trump said.
So what are we going to do? We're going to worry about still have Trump deranged syndrome, or are we going to worry about who's going to be the next president of the United States? We got to get over Donald Trump. The interest rate's about to go. Come on, man.
We can't get over Donald Trump because he's currently the president. He's got three more years in the White House where he can do.
So if we focus
a lot
on
of
him,
damage, he can do a lot of damage to the democracy and to a lot of people. So I think you can't not talk about Donald Trump. I just don't. I understand what you're trying to say about looking to the next election, but there are a lot of people who don't believe there'll be a next election because of the guy that you got in the White House right now. So you got to talk about him. There is one thing, Nathan, that you said that I do kind of want to address, where you were talking about shouldn't people look at who's worse when they're trying to make a decision? And I would say largely people should be looking at policy, and they should be looking at what people in leadership say. Here's the dangerous thing if you want to talk about just sort of like the violence. And this is something that I think we got to be careful of. You can't take the actions of one deranged individual and try to apply that more broadly to everybody who subscribes to that political philosophy. And I think that's the danger of the blame game, is you want to take what this guy did to Charlie Kirk or what the guy did to Paul Pelosi, and you want to take those actions, those heinous actions of those individuals, and ascribe them to everybody who is a part of that political party. I think that is dangerous. I think people who perpetrate the violence should be judged on the violence they perpetrate. Now, if you want to be critical of people of a party for their language and their rhetoric, that's one thing. But what you got to get out of this notion is we're all responsible for our actions. There's nothing that Donald Trump or Barack Obama or anybody that can say they don't have a remote control over me that makes me go out and do something crazy. That's on the individual. Yes, can we talk about that? Can we judge them and say, I don't want to be associated with that party because of their rhetoric, because of this, that, or the other? But to try to take the violent actions of a handful of deranged people, whether that's on the right or the left, and try to assign that to an entire party and say this party is violent, when you're talking about one or two people, you're not talking about millions of Americans who are going out and perpetrating violence. I just think that's a dangerous characterization that we get into sometimes, is trying to ascribe, something to entire parties or political ideologies because of the actions of one person. Now, if we want to criticize their rhetoric and policy, that's what we need to be deciding on. But because one deranged person takes a shot, I don't necessarily think that's fair to say that's representative of the whole.
I saw people who were actually, it seemed to me, like just from what I was reading on social media, they were actively sort of like saying that like the Bengals ownership was wrong because they didn't do a moment of silence or some type of vigil for Charlie Kirk. And for me, I took it back to Colin Kaepernick when people were saying, "Hey, we don't want politics in our sports." How is this any different? I asked the crew already, Kevin, so I want to catch you up with it. But is this different from Colin Kaepernick in the sense that this is injecting politics into sports? Like, I get it. Let's say, God forbid, you have a president that is, not with us anymore while they're in office. Okay, I get it. Democrat or Republican, I get that. But this was not an elected official. This guy was an influencer. He was way more than just a podcaster. People try to diminish him by saying that. I keep telling people, you just don't understand just how influential and powerful Charlie Kirk was and Turning Point USA is to this day. But do you see any connections between Kaepernick and this situation with Charlie Kirk as it relates to NFL?
So here's a better, I think people won't like this, but here's what I think is a better application maybe than comparing it to Kaepernick. I would agree with it from the standpoint of the politics and the polarizing nature of the subject matter. Colin Kaepernick was a polarizing sports and political figure because of the stance that he took against police brutality and racism. And of course, Donald Trump was at the center, once again, surprise, surprise, of politicizing that situation. Here's what I would say, and I can't remember this. When the George Floyd situation happened, what did the NFL do with regard to that? Did they have? I don't believe they had any kind of moment of silence for George Floyd, but out of the George Floyd thing came I think, a bunch of anti-racism initiatives, right, from the NFL. So they didn't particularly do anything for George Floyd for Floyd, but they attacked the wider issue of racism and this sort of thing, right? The NFL would have been better served in this incident with Charlie Kirk. And some NFL teams did this, even those that chose to do the moment of silence. Like, instead of making it about Charlie Kirk, the NFL could have made it about the overall topic of gun violence and violence in general. Leave the man's name out of it, right? Just as they did with George Floyd, but take up the issue. Take up the issue of political violence or gun violence in our country and leave it there. Treat it in the similar fashion. So that way you're not ignoring it. They didn't have a moment of silence for George Floyd, but they acknowledged sort of what happened and the need to address the larger societal problem. They should have done the same thing here with Charlie Kirk, because I guarantee you, if they would have done a moment of silence for George Floyd across the NFL, there would have been people who would have had a problem with that. They would have said that he was a criminal, he didn't deserve that, he had been arrested for, this, that, or that. They would have come up with a million reasons to say why it was inappropriate to do a moment of silence for George Floyd. He was a citizen, just like Charlie Kirk was. Again, we're not talking about a president or a larger than life national hero. That would have been a better way, I think, for the NFL to have handled that, rather than singling out this guy where it seems like if you're doing that, you're endorsing him, right? This is the thing that Michelle was kind of trying to argue when she said FC Cincinnati pulled the sponsorship. She saw that as an endorsement of Charlie Kirk because of the politics. And so I think the NFL would have been better served by attacking the issue of violence or political violence, having a moment of silence for that. And like I said, I think there were some NFL teams, I think it was maybe Minnesota or somebody, that didn't specifically single out Kirk, but they did violence for everybody. I think Minnesota probably did it because they had the school shooting up there. So they acknowledged all of the shootings that had taken place. So it might have been a little bit more personal for Minnesota that they didn't want to acknowledge Kirk and leave out the political victims as well as the school shooting victims there. So they did something more broadly, but I think the NFL would have been better served by attacking the issue instead of spotlighting the man.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I think that would have been a smarter way of dealing with it. Absolutely, yeah. And that way, you're consistent to what you've already been doing. Mm-hmm. And like you said, you don't personalize it. But then again, you would have had people, I think, primarily on the right, who would have said, well, why aren't you personalizing it? Use his name. They would have said somehow you're anti-Charlie Kirk. So it's kind of like damned if you do, damned if you don't. But I think being consistent to your brand and what you've already done is never a bad way to go. So yeah, I think it's a smart way. What do you think, Tarris?
Yeah, I'm over it now, man. I wish they've used this thing. Oh, I'll say this. I'll go back to this. Anything that we can do to get more souls into Jesus Christ, I'm with it. If Charlie Kirk is going to bring more people and we're going to get more souls saved, I'm cool with it. You know what I'm saying? Whether he was on the side of white supremacy or whatever side, because the truth is going to prevail itself. Because I talked to my pastor about it. He's like, we got to go to the cross on this one. What Peter wanted to fight a certain way, we couldn't do it. So we have to make sure. I have to make sure I take myself out of it, learn that, and this Charlie Kirk stuff, not speak out of thing, because these white boys are on a rampage. I had this one white dude send me a message to see my thoughts on Charlie Kirk so he could screenshot it and send it out to other people to see if I was going to get canceled, but I didn't fall for it. That's what I think that we should be aware of, is these people who have never felt what it felt like to have one of their heroes hit. Now they feel what it feels like, and now they're on the last trying to get and attack anybody they can. So I'm watching and I'm praying and I'm hoping that when all the dust settles and all this kind of stuff and Charlie Kirk's legacy, if they really use it for what it's meant to be, bringing souls to Christ, and when the souls get to Christ, let Christ deal with it.
Hey, Tarris, the only thing I'll push back on you is this, and I say this as someone who is a member of the clergy, is if you're going to lead folks to Christ, lead them to Christ. Because if you're not leading them to Christ, you're leading them someplace else. So let's make sure that we talk about all of these folks who are out here. And I don't want anybody to interpret what I'm saying applies to Charlie Kirk. I'm just saying this in general. You take it how you want it, interpret it how you want it. But this is what I'm saying as someone who takes very seriously that call, and what you, not only what you project, but the words that you use is, in order to lead people to Christ, you got to show them Christ. And some of the things, and I'm not talking about any specific person, but I'm just saying some of the things, if you look around and you see people's attitudes, what they say, their behavior, I always say that judge people by their fruits, how they treat people, how they live their lives. And so I'm always looking at people, and I see a lot of people who talk about trying to lead people to Christ who deal in a lot of hate. And I just don't understand how one reconciles the love of God with hating your brother. I didn't say it. It's what the scripture says. It says, how can you hate your brother whom you see every day and claim to love God whom you have not seen? Right? And anybody who says that is a liar. Don't say Kevin S. Aldridge said it. I'm just quoting scripture to you for those of you out there who are believers. So if you're out there dealing in hate, but you claim to love God, I didn't say it. God said it. Stop lying. And so I'll leave it there.
And, for the people who get really emotional and get really caught up with what Charlie Kirk said, because he said a lot of stuff that people said was racist or whatever, is, in my humble opinion, what he built with Turning Point USA is far more impactful than what he said in these interviews and these podcasts. And, if you've really got an issue with it, then I would say then you start your own organization that, speaks to what you want to speak to, because Turning Point USA is not, it'll probably outlive every last one of us in terms of its influence on these college campuses and young people and which way they go in terms of voting. And that's why he was so important to the Republican Party. It wasn't just what he said, it was what he did. So my question and challenge would be, what are you going to do? And I'll just leave it right there. Phil is back. Let's keep this going. So this happened in Ohio. A Starbucks barista, and sometimes they have Starbucks inside of Kroger stores, was fired after writing racist favorite drink on a Charlie Kirk order. Apparently what's been happening is people have been giving the name Charlie Kirk on their Starbucks order. And that way the barista has to say the name Charlie Kirk. And I guess
I think you're wrong. I thought what it was they're ordering some drink that was his drink.
That too. But the other part about it is
using the name Charlie Kirk.
They're using the name Charlie Kirk. So the barista has to say Charlie Kirk. And it's a way of just, I don't know what they're trying to do with it. But this one barista, just happened in Ohio, decided to write on the cup racist favorite drink on the order. When the customer got it, they took it right back in. No surprise. And this person was fired. Did Starbucks do the right thing? Or what else should they do, in your opinion? Firing this barista.
Fired. That's just, you don't do that on your job. Yeah, you don't do that that's just, you got to take accountability. When you get fired, it's like on Friday. How you get fired on your day? You just walk. You like, you got me. And you like, I'm gone. Hopefully you have mercy on me. Hope you got somebody, but that's fireable. Get out of here.
Yeah, I agree with Tarris. Keep your politics out of your workplace. If you work for an employer, likewise, as you're dealing with your people on your job, like that's not the place for political stances and things of that nature, especially when your behavior impacts the bottom line of somebody else's business. Do that on your own time and hope that don't get you fired. But I'm just like, if you're bringing that kind of stuff into the workplace, you're just asking for trouble. And it's hard to feel sorry for someone who goes into their job and does that, because it actually is a disrespect. I think it's a disrespect to your employer, because it says you have no regard for how your actions, is going to impact the place that pays you a check. And I just think that's wrong. And I think if you do that and you get fired, you will not get any sympathy from me, because you're asking for trouble.
Starbucks as a company should probably took that and run with it. If the people are coming to get the whether you agree with it or not, if people are coming to patronize your business, I would have a whole Charlie Kirk barista menu. If you know what I'm saying, if you're looking at the capitalistic way of it, I mean, but firing this person is that's the least that least they could do.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely the barista, put themselves in this position. But maybe, I don't know, should Starbucks have some type of rule change? Because what's happening is people are using the purchasing of their order as a political statement. I saw a video where a patron got really upset because the barista just said Charlie and not Charlie Kirk. And the person got all mad and got
like
real upset.
Like pronouns now. He's going to have Charlie Kirk's going to have his own pronoun.
Yeah. But that puts the baristas in a very difficult situation, right? Because if you write Charlie Kirk here and I say Charlie, right? Because I don't want to say Charlie Kirk, and then somebody has this whole thing. Did I do something wrong? I mean, maybe by the letter of the law I did. And then what are the rules? Can you put any name on the side of your order and they have to say the name no matter what the name is?
Well, I think if it's something like that, like you see these videos all the time of people who like to go around to the public address in these stores and give them these fake names, but when you say the name, it's something like really offensive or embarrassing, and people do that kind of as a joke, and so the person unwittingly does this, uses that name until they hear themselves saying it over the intercom, but by then it's too late. So I would say that's if somebody gives you the name Charlie, like what are you going to say as the barista? Nah, I'm gonna need to see your license to make sure that that's your actual name, right? Like most people don't interact, because I mean I go to Starbucks all the time and I just give them my name and they write it on there. Now I don't know anything about phrases. I've never seen that. Like when I've been in Starbucks to get an order, like I've never seen anybody give a phrase to be said. Now, if you have like 20 Charlies in a row or 5 or 6 Charlies in a row, then at some point you might get the picture like, okay, this is a statement thing that this group of people are doing. But I don't think you can hold the baristas responsible if you have somebody who wants to, use the name Charlie. Like, how do you know that that's not really that person's name versus them trying to make a statement? So I think you got to use some. No.
They wrote the name Charlie Kirk, right?
Oh, they did. They gave both names.
They gave both names, first and last. And
I think if people are hitting you with that, then I think the barista or whomever is sort of obligated to say like, no, I'm not doing that, because clearly that person is not Charlie Kirk. And I think people are gonna do what they do. That person might get mad and say, I'm gonna go get my coffee from someplace else, but
not right now, Kevin. You seen like I said earlier, they're on a rampage. They're trying to cancel anybody they can. So that's why I would say move cautiously when you're going to do that. They're canceling their own. They're canceling whoever they get a chance to try to cancel. They're the same stuff that they got mad for Donald Trump getting done to them. I guess this is their retribution tour to try to do the same, because they're doing the exact same thing that they complained about cancel culture. Oh, the left cancel culture. You think, like, I'll go back to the example that what they did to the guy Aaron Sharp and Lucius Hughes was just ridiculous. But that's what they're on. That's what they're on. They're trying to get rid. They're trying to cancel anybody they can.
You thought that was ridiculous? I thought that him being a co-owner, I thought it was inappropriate for him to make that statement.
Absolutely. I think it was. I mean, that was just, that's the culture that we're in. I think the whole thing was ridiculous because Aaron is a good man. He's a good guy. He employs a lot of people. So that should have been taken in consideration just as much as the statement that he made.
But that's what I'm saying, Tarris. Exactly. So here you are. You got this relationship with TQL. You're employing people, and then you go out and say something reckless. You yourself are putting your employees in danger. And that's why I thought as a co-owner and as a leader, he should have just kept it to himself.
Absolutely. I agree. That's why I'm keeping my mouth shut about stuff that way. I'm not trying to feel that wrath.
We got Raven with us. Hey, good afternoon, Raven.
Hello, people.
Hey, how you doing?
I am all over the place. I just started a new job/business because nobody told me that when you get a job in life insurance, you're basically working for yourself now. So we're doing that. But
are you like a insurance agent now, Raven?
Yes.
Well, give yourself a little plug. Where's your office? What's giving the number? Come on. What companies are you representing? Like one company, like State Farm, or are you like the kind that represents a bunch of them?
So I'm more like a broker.
Okay.
I'll work with like over like 80 different insurance companies because the goal of my job is to find people the best coverage at the absolute most affordable price. And most of what I do is like life insurance, but a big chunk of it is mortgage protection. So like a new homeowner or even somebody who has had a home for some time and you're kind of starting to understand how important it is to protect the equity of your home. As long as you're in Ohio, I can help you with that. So, I work from home. I don't have an official office yet, but I work from home. But if I can figure out how to do it, I'll put my business card, my virtual business card in the chat. And I also made a post on my Facebook page. So you can just go to my Facebook page. You shouldn't have to scroll too far to find it. But yeah, reach out to me. I can help you with
Well,
life insurance.
Raven,
I can help you
there's
with
a
mortgage
bunch of
protection, all that stuff.
there's a bunch of people that for some reason want to buy life insurance on me. I'm not sure why, but anyway.
I mean, I can't, speak as to what the reason might be, but I can set a policy.
Well, we're talking about Charlie Kirk we're talking about this barista that lost their job because they wrote something on the side of the cup of a customer after the customer used the name Charlie Kirk. What's your take on it? Did Starbucks do the right thing, or should Starbucks do something to protect the baristas from this type of political speech on the job?
And I asked what was written on the cup.
Racist favorite drink or something like that.
Okay. So I do have to say that was a poor decision made by the barista. Like, especially in the current political climate that we're in, it was just a poor decision to make. Um, I it, I don't disagree with the sentiment, but at the end of the day, you are still in your role as barista. And so if some weirdo wants to come into my coffee shop and ask me to put Charlie Kirk's name on a freaking plastic or paper cup, I'm gonna do it because I don't care. Like, you're not hurting my feelings by writing Charlie Kirk on a piece of plastic. It doesn't hurt it, like, that does nothing for me. So I like, unfortunately, you got caught doing something inappropriate within your role as an employee, and you were punished for it. Like, even if I do agree with the sentiment, I can see why their employer kind of took the route that they did, because like at the end of the day, this person is still a paying customer and they asked for something specific, and instead of giving them what they asked for or what they ordered, you took it upon yourself to insert your personal politics into a situation that didn't require it when you could have just ignored it. So I don't really see much fault. Starbucks is a business, they got to run their business, and you are making my paying customer uncomfortable in my establishment. You're gonna get punished for that. But at the same time, I completely understand the sentiment, and this is also why I don't do retail or front-facing jobs with customers anymore. Because in this particular political climate, you say the right thing, you don't get the wrong version of Raven today. So,
Yeah, can I go? I want to clarify something about Aaron Sharp, because I do like him and he's a good man, and I want to clarify what I said because I know people watch our program and like to pick that crap apart. I like Aaron Sharp. I think that it was ridiculous what happened to him because Charlie Kirk and everything he stood for this kind of debate. He stood for someone saying what Aaron Sharp said and being able to say that without repercussion. This cancel culture that the right has went on because they've been hurt is why I'm saying it's ridiculous. And when the dust settles, and when you say, after you go back and you say, oh man, that was messed up, we maybe shouldn't have went after Aaron like that because he's a good human. That's all I'm saying. So I'm just clarifying it. It's not anything about what Aaron Sharp did at the moment or anything like that, because we all know that was insensitive. But when you go back to what Charlie Kirk stood on, he would call that kind of stuff out. He would say, he said it himself that he put a mortar that for gun violence, there has to be gun deaths. So these are things that he stood for, that Aaron Sharp was standing for freedom of speech. And that's exactly what's going on. And that's what happened, what we've seen going on. I don't know if the Jimmy Kimmel thing and all this kind of stuff, it all leads into this type of stuff that happened from it, even personally in here. That's what I was saying. The Aaron Sharp stuff, I'm not taking up for him or not taking up for him. I'm just saying it was ridiculous.
Well, Tarris, let
I
me
get your
just say
point.
this. Aaron Sharp can be a good man, and there are a lot of good people, myself included, who have said some dumb things that, consequences come from that. And I said it before, freedom of speech is something I absolutely agree with. But what we have to recognize is that all speech is not free. You have the freedom to say whatever you want, but you don't have the freedom of consequences from the words that you speak. Whether I agree with the sentiment that he said or not, if it's said in an insensitive way at an insensitive time, that's no different than we think about it being insensitivity and offense at inappropriate times, whether the language in and of itself might be questionable. If we think Tom Brenneman using a homophobic slur over the air on the job was unacceptable and that he should have been fired for that, in the same breath, because there might have been a lot of people that agreed with what Tom Brenneman said. The agreement with what somebody says does not necessarily mean that what that person said was appropriate or was sensitive, showed the appropriate level of sensitivity at the time. And I said this, everybody who got in trouble more broadly in the wake of the Charlie Kirk thing were for saying things that were, whether they believe them true or not, were insensitive at the time. Like within an hour or days of the man's death, it's like, okay, there used to be this sentiment of like, hey, you don't kick people when they're down, or you let a period pass, and then it's okay to kind of go in. And so I think people who were being criticized or who were finding themselves in trouble were the people who were just kind of like right out the gate, just dancing on the grave. And I'm not saying that you're not entitled to feel that way or express yourself, but understand that may come with some consequences. And if you're going to say it, then stand 10 toes down on it, which includes the possibility that it could cost you your job. And I just think that has always been the case. When people have said insensitive or offensive things, particularly at the wrong time, they have paid a consequence for it. And I have been pretty consistent in my position, because a lot of times when I've stood on this, it's been when people have used racial or homophobic slurs or other things like that, where I've been unapologetic about, I just don't think in an employment situation that there should be any tolerance for that, that you have to take a stand against this type of thing in public front-facing positions that you don't stand for it. Last thing real quick, Nathan, I didn't quite get what you were saying, but I think I understand it now when you asked the question, should Starbucks do something to protect their employees against this type of thing? The answer to that is yes. I think Starbucks should make clear that if and I think this is standard in most businesses, if customers do something that is out of sorts or inappropriate
or intended to provoke,
yes, you have the right to not serve them. And so I think you have to give these baristas the wherewithal to say, to where if somebody comes in and tries to do something intentionally provocative, that they have the ability as an employee to say, and be backed up by the company, I'm not gonna do that. You want to put Charlie Kirk on, we're not doing that here. And if that person gets upset and mad about it, then you're welcome to go to someplace else and get your coffee. But I do think that Starbucks should do, because I thought about that. I'm like, well, what if I was a black barista and somebody came up and gave me a name that was decidedly racist? Right? Would I feel the same about that? It's easy to slough off like Charlie Kirk if you don't agree with him, or you don't, no harm, no foul with Charlie Kirk. But what if somebody came up and used a provocative racial term and asked me to put that on their cup? I absolutely wouldn't do it, and might have a few choice words to say to that individual, similar to what the barista did. So I think Starbucks has to put some things in, or should put some things in place that gives baristas the right to deny service if people are going to, try to take those sort of provocative points and back them up. So I kind of wasn't getting that when you were saying that earlier.
I would agree with that as well. Because when I was talking before, somebody had put that in the chat. Like, what if what if somebody asked me to write the N-word on a cup? And it's like, and you know, with all my good God given common sense, I thought to myself, well, of course, you know, I wouldn't like as a response as an employee of Starbucks, they wouldn't actually expect me to write the N-word on a cup for a customer just because they asked for it. But if there's no like policy or rules put in place, can I really say that confidently as a barista at Starbucks? So I agree with Kevin. I do think that there has to be something put in place in order to prevent stuff like that. Like I think, but also again, to reiterate my original point, I think there is a difference between just saying the name of a racist versus saying an actual racial epithet. You know what I mean? Like, if somebody walks into Starbucks and asks, "Can you put Hitler on my cup?" Number one, I do think that would get a lot more response than a racial slur, which is insane, but that's a whole other conversation. But I do think that there's a difference between that and then somebody walking in and be like, "Hey, can you put, you know, the J boo word on my on a cup, or can you put, you know what I'm saying, the N word on a cup?" Like, as a barista, especially as somebody I at one point in my life did work at a particular Starbucks inside of Kroger. Ain't no way you would have got me to write that word, and I would have took whatever repercussions came with that, because you tripping and you're doing this on purpose. And now you're not just simply patronizing this business, you're harassing me at this point. And I think that is where Starbucks has an opportunity to draw that line. You cannot come into our stores as a customer and harass our employees based on whatever your political or just whatever your ideologies are. You don't get to use that in a process in which we are being of service of to you don't get to exploit that to harass our employees. So I think that if they do anything, that's where they should take it.
Right. And so to any baristas out there, what I would tell you, if somebody comes up and writes Charlie Kirk on a cup, they're trying to get a reaction out of you.
Mm-hmm.
They're trying to get you fired. Don't play into it. Like what Raven said, do your job. Hey, Charlie Kirk, and keep it moving like it's nothing.
Yeah.
And you take away the
Because what
energy.
they're looking for is a
You
reaction.
take away
That's all.
that's what they're looking for, a react.
Yeah.
They want to get you fired because they don't work at Starbucks, right? You do. So don't give it to them. Do your job, keep it moving, and that's it. Keep it going. And the one last thing, and going back to what Tarris said, I made the point earlier, is that I think, and again, I watched a lot more of Charlie Kirk than I realized until after his passing. I'm like, But I think that Charlie Kirk would have been against what happened with the co-owner of Lucius Q.
He would have been against it.
He would have been against it because he himself said it many times. He was free speech, even extreme speech. He was for formats like this, where you sit down and debate and you can do it in a civilized manner. Ironically, I didn't think about this until now. That's what he was all about, on top of all the other stuff that I thought was against what I believe in. But that's what the man stood for. So how do you now, in his name, go against what he stood for? It's just not consistent.
And crazy, ironically.
No. Here's where you guys are getting it. Here's where you guys are kind of missing the point. And this is where I want to differentiate. And I don't know if you guys talked about this earlier, or is this something we're going to get into a little bit later? But I want to differentiate what happened to Jimmy Kimmel with sort of what we're talking about here with Lucius Q, because I think you got to understand the subtleties of this whole First Amendment free speech thing. First Amendment and free speech, absolutely. You have the ability to say what it is that you want to say, right? But the First Amendment and free speech applies to what the government is not allowed to do to infringe upon your free speech. It says nothing about what your employer can do.
Kevin, let me
finish. It talks about what the government can't do to stop or censor free speech.
Right.
So what the FCC and what Donald Trump were trying to do to ABC and Disney and Jimmy Kimmel is absolutely a violation of the First Amendment. FCC choosing to pull Lucius Q sponsorship and his partners pushing him out over what he said is not an infringement upon his freedom of speech. He can say what he wants to say, but there are consequences that go along with that, because here's the difference.
It depends on how you look at it, Kevin, but go right ahead.
No, because it comes down to what I've argued all along. It's a business decision. when the words and the actions that you take have the potential to impact the bottom line, to make customers not want to patronize you or to boycott or to do anything against your business, that has consequences. So you know what got Jimmy Kimmel back on the air? The customers who was canceling all of those Disney Plus the customers Trump tried to force their hand, which was against the First Amendment. The customers used their purchasing power to get their attention in the same way that folks who was upset about how Target did with DEI used their purchasing power to influence a business decision. When these companies are making these decisions, trust me, it is less political and more to do with the bottom line.
Not in all cases.
Not in all cases, but in the majority of cases.
And Kevin, I agree. I agree with what Kevin's saying on that. I agree with what you're saying, Kevin. But with this situation with the Lucis Q's and the Jimmy Kimmel, it's the same root cause. People got upset, made push to where it made like you said, an economical impact on the bottom line. Because FC Cincinnati would have had an economic impact on their bottom line if they wouldn't have. Lucius Q's would have had a temporary, if they wouldn't have part ways with. But I think, and I hope this to be true. I hope it was just behind the scenes or some behind the scenes. Oh yeah, we're going to put out there that that Aaron's not the manager, or he's not involved with us anymore. But that takes a lot of undoing to get some kind of business partner out of there. It's not just some. We're going to do it. So I'm hopefully they just played along with the game and said, all right, until when selection's over, we're going to keep everything. Because oddly, Aaron Sharp is educator, is an educator in TV, radio, broadcast communication. When I started college back in 2000 at NKU, he was one of my professors. He was on air at WNKU, I believe it was, the NPR radio station. So he comes from this. So I think, like where you might think it's not the same, I think it all is in one and the same. It was pressure by economic impact that could have been weathered. If I was Aaron, I would have weathered it out because they're not that tough. Wait until after this election. All these people with all this influence in Cincinnati, you're going to see their views and your numbers and your shares going all the way down. They inexperience is running amok in this cancel culture that they've never had any chance to have any kind of influence like this. So here they go and trying to cancel everybody, but it's not going to last for too much longer.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, Kevin, and I think you're right. There definitely is a difference and people sometimes mistake it. I'm glad you put that out there. You're talking about freedom of speech and not pressure from the government, but I stand by what I said from what I picked up over the years. I think Charlie Kirk would have been against it. He would have, I can't speak for the man, but just based upon everything I saw and read and all the hours of watching his podcast, he would have said that he got a right to say that and keep moving on. No big deal, even when it comes to Lucius Q. But you're right. People may say that's a business decision. You could make an argument that maybe have been connected to some pressure that could have came down from the government in some way. But I mean, we'll never really know. But I hear what you're saying. Speaking of which, let's talk about Jimmy Kimmel. He's coming back tonight. Will you be watching? Can you watch it wherever you live? Because not all of the affiliates, Nexstar and Sinclair broadcasting groups, which together own about, 150 ABC affiliates around the country, they are going to continue with their boycott of the Jimmy Kimmel show, waiting for further negotiations. But will you be watching Jimmy Kimmel? Should Jimmy Kimmel have ever lost his job? And what does this say to you now that he's back?
Yeah, I don't think he should have. I don't think he should have ever lost his job for all of the reasons that I said earlier. I think he lost, or he didn't lose it. He was suspended, or whatever that was. The indefinite suspension came about as a result of, I think, the government pressure. Now ABC and I think Disney have said, they tried to use the line that I just said about the inappropriateness of what he said at the time and in the moment as the reason why they took a break. I think that's all corporate speak. I mean, I think there was governmental pressure. I think the customer pressure was what made them respond and bring him back on the air.
Also,
and
talent pressure.
I just think that's a dangerous place for us to be in as a nation when the government can try to start to determine you know, what jokes can be told, who can say what or what. Let the marketplace. That's why I said let the marketplace decide that. So if ABC had decided that there was such a backlash from their viewers who found that so distasteful and they didn't want to watch Jimmy Kimmel anymore, and ABC said, "Hey, look, our viewers are bad. They're jumping off the lifeboat. They're abandoning this thing. We got to make it because this is not what our viewers, what our customers want." That is a sound decision. But to make that decision because the president don't like the jokes that's being made about him, and this is part of his retribution tour, that I don't agree with and support, nor do I think any other American should support. So let the market dictate what you do with Jimmy Kimmel. Trust me, if enough viewers of his show, I mean, I doubt that many people on the right who complained about Jimmy Kimmel actually even watch Jimmy Kimmel. I don't even know whether they do or not. And I think all of these stations who are making a choice about whether or not to air Jimmy Kimmel or not, you know, should do so based on what their audience wants, not any kind of political stance that they're taking. So if you've got viewers in your audience who want to see this, you ought to make it available for them to see it, because it's not like, I mean, you're essentially cutting your own throat from a business standpoint, because it ain't like people can't go on YouTube or wherever and they'll go somewhere else and see Jimmy Kimmel. I guess what these stations are saying is we'll forgo those viewers and those ratings numbers to make a political statement. And you know, I guess that's fine if you're willing to do that. If they want to stand on that principle, good for them. But yeah, man, I mean, I think it's a good thing. I think people in Cincinnati should be able to watch it here, because I actually think Sinclair does not own the ABC affiliate here in Cincinnati. I think they own 12, not 9. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, 9 is the ABC affiliate here in Cincinnati. So I think people here should be able to watch Jimmy Kimmel tonight if they want to.
Yeah, to my knowledge, you are correct.
Yeah, but that's the thing, man. That's the great thing about America. If you don't like what Jimmy Kimmel has to say, change the channel, cut the TV, don't watch, flip to something where somebody is talking about what you want to talk to. There are 1 million cable channels on now and 1 million different streaming platforms. And man, go watch what you want to watch. You don't have to watch Jimmy Kimmel if you don't like him. And that's, I think that is what is at the essence of what you were saying. I think that Charlie Kirk would advocate for. If you don't want to listen to it, you don't have to. And there were a whole lot of people who didn't listen to Charlie Kirk prior to his death, who didn't know who he was prior to his death, who were just coming into knowledge of the things that he said, because they just didn't watch him, because he was nobody that they wanted to watch. And so if people want to watch that, as distasteful as we find it, let them watch it.
I want to Phil, did you want to go before me?
I'll just say one thing quick. I was reading looking this up. When Vladimir Putin came to office, actually at the time, Russia had a fairly thriving TV media market with a lot of humor, often directed at the government, and specifically some at Putin. They had characters, you can look it up. Well, guess what? First thing he did was get rid of them. He got rid of the comedians. And so and remember something, we might feel good about Kimmel being back, but remember, Colbert's, he's been canceled as of next year. And why was he canceled? The same reason that this happened with Kimmel, because there was a merger and they wanted FCC approval for it. And so whether Kimmel's back or not, I think it's a very dangerous time that we're in.
I'll talk about the mainstream media, and I'll go to the Queen song. Another one bites the dust. As a streamer and as someone who is, who's into bringing the news to the people who I like, see you, Jimmy Kimmel. Your ratings were horrible anyway. And
but that wasn't
what happened?
why.
Hold on. I know. Let me finish my point, Phil. You're in agreement with me when I say this. After I'm done, you're gonna be like, "Oh, T, you know, you're right." What happened to bipartisan late night talk shows like Johnny Carson. You didn't know what political affiliation Johnny Carson had. What happened to David? I would stay up with my dad and watch.
So
What?
what?
Let me
What
finish.
does that have to do with
Let me
it?
finish. Because you're not listening, Phil.
I'm listening.
If you let me finish, you would have political party people on both sides. Johnny Carson would make jokes about Democrats and Republicans. Kimmel, Joy Reid, all these people in the mainstream media who Donald Trump has identified and said, we're going to go, like a retribution tour. They were all left-wing media propaganda proper uppers. They don't have good balanced divergency. We got
So
more
why
balance.
does it have to be
We got
balanced?
more good balance. Why does it have to be balanced? Because
Yeah.
that's
It's called
good.
free speech, First Amendment. You don't have a right to tell.
You don't
have a right to tell Jimmy
This is
Kimmel
what I'm
you have to
talking. This is what I'm
balance it.
talking. This is what I'm talking about when it comes
Free
to
speech.
it's free speech. But so I can say it's free speech, and I'm glad he's gone because all that free speech that is funded by
So
a
what you're
certain
saying
amount
is
of people.
you think what you
You
saying is
you don't even let me. I don't
no,
know what I'm saying because you
assuming
correct me so
Kimmel
much.
assuming Kimmel didn't come back, you're saying I think that's good, even though it was government action by Brendan Carr that forced him off. You're saying, oh, I think that's good because I never liked that. I want balance, and there wasn't balance there, so it's good the government forced him off. Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm saying I didn't like Jimmy Kimmel. I think his programming was trash. There hadn't been good programming on late night programming since yes, is my opinion. And since Arsenio Hall, the here lately, it's been all left wing propaganda.
We get that, but you're saying the government. It's okay for the government to force him off.
I'm saying okay. No. I'm not saying that, Phil. I'm saying that if the government forced him off, I'm glad that he's coming back now. Then we can compare the numbers to see if it's really relevant for him to be on there or not. Because people really we're going to find out if people are going to tune in or not.
Guess what?
We get more ratings over here.
No,
we get more ratings here than they do over at Jimmy Kimmel does.
You're going to compare NBC and ABC. You think they're too dumb to look at the numbers that these guys, the ratings? You're saying, oh, gee, now that he's back, let's see how his ratings are. They're always looking at ratings. And prior to the government getting involved, they kept him on the air. Case closed.
They kept him on the air, but now that they're going to go back and they're going to say, look at his ratings from before and look at his ratings now. And if they keep him after that, because it's a known fact, mainstream media is getting less draw than streamers. You got this streamer named Speed that gets millions and millions of streams.
So
it's obsolete anymore. It's like using a rotary phone.
Well, if it's obsolete, then the market will take care of it.
That's what I'm saying. It's obsolete. The market's going to take care of it. So while they're doing it, while the market's taking care of it, why are we getting attention to Jimmy Kimmel? Because he's got all this money.
He was a victim of government.
There's been so many different victims of
media. That's why
there's been so many different victims of government trying to control the media. There's so many victims of but after
we're the victim. No, he's not. We're the victim. If the government, like Brandon Carr, puts pressure and basically says we'll do it the easy way or the hard way, meaning you get rid of him or we'll deny his license. That's what he was saying. Jimmy Kimmel
not the current license. It wasn't the current license that he was holding over his head. No. He wasn't say he was going to cancel the license that he was going to have for the Jimmy Kimmel show.
What is the hard way? What did he mean by the hard way?
The license, like you said before, they're trying to strike a deal. They're trying to strike a deal.
Hard way that he referred to
a future deal that they're trying to strike, a future deal that they're trying to get, and they were using that as leverage. I don't agree with it, but I'm saying let Jimmy Kimmel die off like the rest of these mainstream media talking heads for the Democratic Party.
But what's the hard way that he referred to?
The hard way is I can't answer that.
Oh, I'll answer it for you.
Speculating. They're saying he will not give him the contract to renew the SEC contract that they're going to get to try to buy this conglomerate.
He is saying that if you don't take this guy off, we'll do it by denying broadcast licenses to stations that show it. That's what he's saying.
That's not true.
Well, then tell me what he meant by the hard way. If that isn't it,
the hard way is you agree that they have a deal pending. They're trying to close a deal.
Yeah,
and they're going
to deny the merger if you don't get rid of Kimmel.
Exactly, not cancel Kimball's show. Kimball was doing a good job on his own canceling his show.
If they keep Kimmel on, they'll deny the merger, and you're okay with that.
No, I'm not saying that. Kimball he's going to self-destruct on his own because his numbers suck, and it's not the rate of return is not good.
Well, if his numbers suck, then the government shouldn't have anything to do with it. Don't you agree?
I'm not saying the government should have anything to do with it or anything not to do with it.
Okay, let me ask you this. What about Colbert? Colbert, it's
I don't
very
like
obvious,
Colbert either.
Colbert was canceled as of next year because they wanted to merge, just like the Kimmel thing, and the word was clearly out. Donald Trump himself said Colbert needs to go, and when Colbert was canceled, what did Trump say? The next one to go is Jimmy Kimmel. And when Kimmel was just canceled, what did Trump say? Now NBC, get rid of Seth Meyers and get rid of Jimmy Fallon. He said that, the president of the United States. You don't think he's trying to use government pressure to interfere with the media? You don't think so?
During the Kamala Harris debates, what they matched up and they got sued for. He has lawsuits against him for trying to use this very same thing, Phil. The very same thing that you're saying that the government is doing, they did with ABC. They documented they doctored.
Who's they? Who is they?
The editors or whoever the powers be that at ABC has been sued for not putting out good.
So they've been sued. I mean, what's your point? Who's they?
So now they were doing this prior to Donald Trump getting in control of the FCC.
Who's they? The TV
ABC,
networks?
the networks, whoever released.
They were doing what? Putting on biased left-wing programming that they have every right to do under the First Amendment.
So they have every right to do it under the First Amendment.
Yes.
But now that there's new leadership, there's new rules.
Where?
There's new leadership in the FCC.
Yeah, exactly. And now the new leadership is pressuring them to get rid of people who make jokes about Donald Trump. You're exactly right.
So
just don't call yourself a First Amendment advocate if you're applauding the fact that we have new leadership that's going to pressure stations to get people off the air that make jokes about Donald Trump.
Whenever it's not fair and balanced journalism, I don't see about.
So you think the government should get rid of journalism that's not fair and balanced? Is that what you're saying?
If it's trash journalism and it's not doing anything good
what do you define as trash?
Hey, Tarris, let me just say something here. That there used to be this concept that was called the equal fairness doctrine principle. Or something. Yeah. And guess who got rid of that? Conservatives got rid of that. They got rid of the fairness doctrine because they wanted the Rush Limbaughs of the world to be able to have their own programming where they didn't have to bring in,
and they should have got rid of it,
where they didn't have to bring in the other side to create the balance. Now, isn't it ironic that 3 decades later, those same people who wanted to get rid of the fairness doctrine now complain about fairness and bias in the media? Wait, before you jump in, Tarris, I'll let you and Phil go at it. So I'm gonna give me a couple minutes here. So
we will.
So again, remember I say the essence of politics is hypocrisy. And I think this is true on both sides of the aisle where political parties make decisions that are politically expedient at the time without thinking about how down the road this is going to come back and bite you in the butt. You remember everybody said Harry Reid was gonna regret getting rid of the mandatory vote totals, and true enough, we're all looking. He did it for political expediency at the time to get what they wanted, and
but
now
that's not the right reason to stop it. The right reason is it's against the Constitution. I'm just saying it's going to hurt us in the future.
I'm just saying that sometimes what is done for political expediency is not well thought out, and that sometimes things are put in place for the right reasons. And so I do think that there's a difference between what you expect from and I think this whole mainstream media. First of all, Jimmy Kimmel, Bill Maher, none of these individuals. None of these individuals. Let me finish, Tarris. None of these individuals are journalists. None of these individuals are journalists. They're entertainers. They're comedians. They are not news people. The problem is.
You're making my point for me, Kevin.
Wait a minute.
You're making
the problem is far too many people get their news from the Bill Mahers, from the Jimmy Kimmels and the Stephen Colberts, because they want their news mixed with entertainment. So this is what you get. These guys are not journalists. So an expectation that a comedian like Jimmy Kimmel, who has a show with his name on it.
So what if they were journalists? Wait a minute, Phil.
If I can finish my thought, you might get there. A guy who has his name on his show is entitled to talk about whatever he wants to talk about,
even if he doesn't have his name.
Huh?
Can I clarify something?
No,
real
I'm
quick?
making the Phil. You're on a whole other thing that I'm not even talking about. In fact, I'm actually trying to agree. I'm actually trying to agree with you.
I'll make a point about mainstream media. Mainstream media is about to be as obsolete as a rotary dial phone. So we're making in my overall point is we're talking about Jimmy Kimmel is going to be on mainstream media when he gets less views than, let's say, Don Lemon, who is no longer on mainstream media and who is now streaming.
It's irrelevant. We're not talking about popularity. We're talking about government interfering.
Okay. So as long as there's no government interference in streaming and you can say whatever you want to without any government regulations, and then you're in the mainstream media and you have to deal with these certain guidelines in FCC and chances of getting canceled, where do you think that people are going to go?
This is the problem with what the First Amendment doesn't let the FCC do what Brendan Tarris,
this is the problem. This is what you're failing to recognize about the danger of what Trump and the FCC or whomever is doing. If you think they're going to stop at ABC, you're talking about streamers can say whatever they want. They're coming for that too. Donald Trump will come for that too with anybody who says things that he don't agree with. And that is the bottom line. You think it's safe now because it's a Wild West and nobody is regulating it. Trust me, if he gets his way and he's able to censor and infringe upon free speech with the government, nobody is safe, including this podcast. Trust me. They will have people watching everything that you say. And you can shake your head and say, no, that ain't it. But that's just like, I saw this thing the other day. This ain't no lie. Dude opened a restaurant, called it Trump Burgers, right? He was an immigrant. Opened a restaurant called Trump Burgers. He was all up MAGA's rear end and Donald Trump's rear end. Guess what? They deported him. They deported him. ICE came and got him after he opened up his Donald Trump hamburgers restaurant. So you're making the same mistake that all of these MAGA folks make with Donald Trump. See, you think he's not talking to you. You think he's not talking about you and the things that you want. And then when he shows up on your doorstep, you're surprised. Oh, and then you want to go to crying and talking about how it's unfair.
You guys are a part of the majority to think that mainstream media still outdoes the streaming and the YouTubes and the
No, that's irrelevant.
That's irrelevant.
How is that irrelevant whenever
we're talking about government pressuring media? We're not
government. Okay, let me answer this. Government can affect mainstream media because they can affect because it's a federal.
They can
in streaming, in streaming, they cannot do anything.
It's against the Constitution.
Anything about streaming.
You're not speaking common sense. First of all, what we're trying to say from the beginning is, regardless of the FCC, the government constitutionally cannot interfere with the First Amendment or free speech. That's the whole reason why we're having this conversation. Donald Trump, what he is attempting to do with the FCC is unconstitutional. Flat out. That's just the bottom line.
So
he has no control. Donald Trump he's trying to exert control over ABC by threatening contract mergers and that sort of thing. But it is unconstitutional.
By suing them and
Tarris, my friend Tarris, I'm gonna tell you, man, either you're pro-democracy and you believe in the Constitution or you don't. Have you flipped this and let's say Joe Biden was in office, I would have the same problem with it as I do with Donald Trump because some things are bigger than politics. What Kevin is saying is absolutely true. I've made the same point. This is bigger than right and left. This is about all of our constitutional rights. And it don't matter whether you vote Republican or don't vote Republican. I quite honestly believe that the biggest offense that Trump took to that monologue had nothing to do with Jimmy Kimmel said about Charlie Kirk. I think it was when he switched and made a joke about Donald Trump. I think that's what
he's been making
Donald Trump really
years.
Upset. And it needs to be said here that Jimmy Kimmel was an equal opportunity offender. When Biden was office, he made all kinds of jokes about
That's exactly true. Nathan, that's not exactly true.
Exactly true. It is exactly true. What I'm saying is,
I watch those
Tarris
guys
tried to make
all
the
the
point
time on
earlier.
YouTube. Colbert,
But hold on. Well, Tarris tried to make the point earlier that somehow Jimmy Kimmel was only making jokes about the right wing. That is not true.
But
That
only
is
had
true,
yes,
Nathan.
him,
By and large,
Nathan,
does.
even if there was, it's irrelevant.
You're wrong.
It's irrelevant.
Jimmy Kimmel
I hear your
and
point.
Steve Colbert
I hear your
constantly
point.
make fun
Desmond
of Trump.
Crockett, all those people, they never have any right-wing people on their programming. It's
And they don't
divided.
have to.
They don't have to.
And
So
they
if they don't
have
have
to.
to, they need whenever the
He's right.
pendulum
He's right
switches.
about that.
When the
They have a
pendulum
right
switches,
to.
when the pendulum switches, you have to deal with the consequences, just like you guys say all the time.
No,
when
Tarris,
the
you
pendulum
don't.
switches
Tarris,
at the
Tarris, what
FCC,
you are
they're
talking
gonna-
about, what you are talking
It's the
about
same
is
thing that we talked about is the
what
Fed.
you're talking
It's the
about
same
is
thing we're talking about.
unconstitutional. There's a difference between, look, you can get right-wing comedians, they can create their own primetime show just like Jimmy Kimmel. They absolutely could. So the question is, why don't they? Because
They
there's
do.
no because
Joe
there's
Rogan.
because
Joe Rogan.
outside of
Charlie
you know
Kirk.
why? You know why? Because
Oh my
outside of
God.
Fox News, there's no appetite for it. And most of the right-wing comedians that
Are you
see,
serious?
most of the
Are you
right-wing
serious,
comedians
Kevin?
that you see are not funny. This is
Yeah,
why
but that's not the point.
no, I'm saying, Phil, I understand that that's not the point.
Charlie Kirk's organization, the Turning Point, is bigger than Jimmy Kimmel. Jimmy Kimmel is
We're talking about late night. We're talking about late night TV.
He built a lot of his progress from Turning Point off of streaming. He did not use the mainstream media to build his platform.
That is not true, Tarris.
You guys are talking
that
about
is not true, Tarris.
Argument has nothing to do, absolutely nothing to do
that's
with
just
what
not
we're talking
true.
about.
Charlie Kirk, what made Charlie Kirk big was undeniably his charisma, his intelligence, but at a young age, he also has some big time, big money, multi-billionaires that tapped him on his shoulder and said, "Hey, listen, we're going to help you get to where you're getting to." You're comparing apples and oranges. Late night to basically a political organization. It's two completely different things.
I'm just saying, like when you talk about the FCC trying to cancel somebody.
Tarris is ignoring the argument. Look, this whole thing that we have, this isn't about taste, about whether you like Jimmy Kimmel, about whatever he said. This is a First Amendment government censorship impending upon the First Amendment conversation. Tarris started this whole thing out by saying he didn't like Jimmy Kimmel, good riddance, all, and fine, he's entitled to that opinion. Again, I say the same thing. If you don't like Jimmy Kimmel, turn the channel, don't watch. Tarris probably wasn't watching Jimmy Kimmel in the first place anyway. And if what you say is true about the ratings, I'm all for it. Let the market decide when they're done with Jimmy Kimmel, when the viewers are done with Jimmy. That's how it should be decided. If his jokes is stale, if he ain't hitting, if he's irrelevant, the market will decide. But what Donald Trump is trying to do is apparently he don't believe that Jimmy Kimmel is irrelevant and that he is in the same state that you are, because Donald Trump sees Jimmy Kimmel as a threat, if nothing else, to his own little fragile ego.
That's it.
Hey, Tarris, if Jimmy Kimmel was as bad as you say he is, then why is Donald Trump worried about him? Donald Trump is worried about Jimmy Kimmel because he feels like Jimmy Kimmel is effective. He feels like Jimmy Kimmel gets under his skin. And so that it absolutely is true.
It's true about the ego. It's true about the ego part. When they go to these correspondence dinners and they go to these places and they're taking jabs back and forth at each other, it don't sting. It wouldn't sting so much if I say it or if Jimmy Kimmel says it, because they got to see each other at these correspondence dinners and all these things going back and forth.
You are living in You talk about Trump derangement syndrome. You got Trump derangement syndrome.
I already told you. I told you already.
That Trump is not that thin-skinned.
I think he is. I think he's that thin-skinned. I think
you are far more intelligent than some of the views you put forward sometimes.
I think that Donald Trump,
you are in denial about how thin-skinned Donald Trump is, and that is absolutely why he wants to get rid of Jimmy Kimmel and Colbert. Because if they were on their way out the door, as Donald Trump said, then why is he so concerned about it? Just let him wither on the vine. Nobody's watching.
And why is he coming back?
Because that's what they do back and forth.
And why has he been on the air for like, what, 25 years? Why has he been on the air if he's not popular?
Because they're in that upper echelon of the 1%ers. So if a 1%er says something about a 1%er, they're going to take it more serious than like if I say something about Donald Trump. He's not using. You make it seem like if I make the same joke as Jimmy Kimmel made about Donald Trump, he's going to go after Jimmy Kimmel because they're in the same kind of category or hierarchy. But they're not good. You guys are trying to make it seem like Donald Trump is going personally after Jimmy Kimmel and using hold on, and using the FCC, using the FCC unprovoked and unwarranted. He's doing he's doing exactly to them what they did to him. So I don't understand what he's doing. When they use ABC, you say the government shouldn't be able to. When the government and Kamala Harris, when the government and Kamala Harris use ABC to lie and misrepresent her on questions, filling in blanks, and it was supposed to be live. Oh my God! That's why the lawsuit. Okay, I can't. So
you said they used the
and there was. This is the same thing that happened whenever you guys were still believing that Kamala Harris was going to beat Donald Trump. So I'm gonna have to bow out. I can't argue with you guys. You guys are going to think the way you guys.
Yeah, but there's just no truth to what you're saying. There's no evidence or truth or facts to what you're saying whatsoever. And then for people who keep saying Jimmy Kimmel's numbers, Jimmy Kimmel has 20 million subscribers on YouTube.
So Tarris, where is your evidence that the Biden administration and Kamala Harris ever threatened ABC and said, if you don't doctor this video in our favor, we're going to cancel a merger contract with you, or we're going to take Stephanopoulos? Where is your evidence?
I don't think they ever did that, but they did do during the campaign, Kamala Harris's campaign, when she was supposed to have a live interview. They doctored, and that's. Who doctored it, Tarris? Who doctored it? ABC directors.
Okay.
I don't know who. I don't know the ABC directors. So the ABC directors documented and misrepresented it as something that was live.
They have a right.
They got caught. They got sued, and that's FCC stuff. And they did that under the.
No, it's not.
They never said that the interview was live. And then,
oh my goodness,
they never said it was live. It's always edited, just like Fox News. They have the right to edit their footage for time or whatever. There's no evidence whatsoever to what you're saying, because if it was, you would have showed it already, and we'd be able to see it. That's what the Trump legal team said, and we all get upset because ABC bowed down to them when they had a really good defense.
And this speaks to the ignorance. This speaks to the ignorance that most people have. This speaks to the ignorance that most people.
And then they settle, but there's nothing to see here.
Hey, come on now, you smarter than. Come on, you smarter than that, brother. How many settlements also often end up with not necessarily, because Donald Trump is the master of this. How many settlements has he had where he hasn't admitted any guilt to anything and settled it just to get it out of the way?
No, they didn't settle for that reason. They settled because they knew they were going to deny the merger.
Which one is it?
Correct.
It did not happen.
It doesn't matter.
Did it not happen? Did any of this that I just said? You said I was delusional. None of this stuff ever happened. I just made it all up. Or did they merge?
So no, Tarris, we're not saying any of it didn't happen. We're saying that you are twisting the facts as a lot of people that kind of think like you often do. Like, facts don't matter. It matters whatever little warped story from Donald Trump that you want to buy. And I don't understand. It boggles my mind how you will believe and side with somebody who has lied over 50,000 times, like Donald Trump, or 30,000, whatever it is. He's probably over 100,000 now by this point. But somebody who is a known, proven liar, who's been caught in his lies, who will say he didn't say something that you got tape of. That is a guy that you will believe every word that he says. Why would you believe anything that Donald Trump says, particularly when it comes to this? And again, what you talk about just speaks to the ignorance of people who don't do journalism and don't understand what goes involved in an editing process. You're talking about particularly a TV show that probably had how many minutes or maybe even an hour or more of an interview with Kamala Harris that you have to condense into what, a 8 to 10 minute segment. I don't know how long it was, but everything that she says in there is not going to come out in an edited version. An hour long conversation or even a 20-minute conversation is not going to be encapsulated in a 5 to 6 minute segment. That's just natural journalistic editing. If I go out and interview 10 people for a story, all 10 of those people that I interview are not going to get included in a news story. You discern what are the most impactful parts of the interview, and that is what you present to the audience. Now, if somebody wants to come in after the fact and look at what you left on the cutting room floor, yeah, you can make that look like anything. You could do that with any interview. And this is what Donald Trump excels at doing, and his people buy it. But any news story on any day goes through the editing process that ABC News did with that.
But they have a right to mislead. Even if they're misleading people, they have a right to under the Constitution. It isn't a question of whether they screwed people over. It wasn't a question that they made Harris look better. Even if they were totally dishonest in how they did it, they have a right under the Constitution to show whatever they want.
Correct. And the other thing is Phil made a
it does need to be it does need to be factual though, Phil. I mean, whether it's leaning one way, whether it leans one way or not, you can make that argument. But it does have to be factual, or you
why does it have to be factual? Why?
Huh? Because it's illegal. Because you can get sued. Because you can get sued. If I knowingly print.
Listen to me. You can get sued for defamation or slander.
Yes.
That is true. But it's not a question if it's unconstitutional. It's a question of
it's not a constitutional question, but it is a legal question.
All right, that's fine. Right. That's fine.
Phil hit the head on the nail several times, and there's a connection between the reason why ABC settled that lawsuit when it came to the 60-minute interview, and the same reason why they gave Jimmy Kimmel the axe, and that is because
and CBS settled too on 60 Minutes.
And that is the reason they have a big merger. They're trying to make more money, and they don't want to upset the government. And they want the government and the FCC to rubber stamp this merger so everybody can make a lot of money. That's what it all comes down to. It's not about right and wrong. It's about money.
We're all saying the same thing. So they can.
No, don't do that. No, we were not saying the same thing, sir.
When it comes down to money, it comes down.
Nah, you were saying something completely different.
I'm saying that streaming is taking over mainstream media.
That's a whole different conversation.
That's not even what we're talking about.
We're talking about Jimmy Kimmel, right? And
wow, we're talking about the government trying to use its power to silence media. That's what the argument is.
What kind of media? What kind of media?
The fake doesn't matter. They can't silence any kind of media. It doesn't matter.
The mainstream media that I've been talking about for the entire year that we've been on this programming, I've been sticking to my gun saying, watch them crumble, watch them fall. Mainstream media, one by one, going down. Don Lemon went down.
They could go down commercially, but
all of
they
them
can't go down because the government makes them.
Because people talk about TikTokers and YouTubers and all that kind of stuff, but the TikTokers and the YouTubers are having more of an influence than all these Jimmy Kimmel.
It has nothing to do with the conversation, Tarris. And you know, it's so curious, man. Humans are the only creatures on the planet.
Jimmy Fallon or any of these shows commercially fall or rise on the viewership. Nobody disputes that. What we are saying, though, is that when the government puts its thumb on it, as Donald Trump has done with Colbert, as he did with Kimmel, and he now says openly he wants to do it with Seth Meyers and with Jimmy Fallon, that's where the Constitution is violated. It has nothing to do with whether people are streaming more or watching conventional media. It has nothing to do with it.
It all boils down to money.
You know what's even more, Tarris, you know what's even more dangerous is that, and I don't know how much these YouTubers or these streamers make, but I doubt that they've got the deep pockets that an ABC or a Disney or these big corporations have. And they're much easier to pick off than a New York Times or someplace else, because all Donald Trump got to do is lean on that influencer a little bit, just take you to court, and they probably ain't got the resources to defend against that.
So untrue.
No, it's not. It's not untrue. There's no YouTuber.
When Kamala Harris called
Tarris, stop. I'm just stopping. Tarris, stop. There is no.
Listen what he has to say, Kevin. You're right, but listen what he has to say.
What he's about to say is absolute foolishness.
I know, but let him say it though. Go ahead, Tarris. Let him say. Go ahead, Tarris. I want to hear this.
When Kamala Harris called Casanat one of the toppest streamers in the entire, after Donald Trump went on to that one white boy's stream, and they were trying to scramble, and Kamala Harris called Casanat. Casanat went on his stream and said, "Why are all these Secret Service people calling me?" Had millions of people on there talking about, I don't want to be a part of this. And what did they do? They left him alone. So they cannot put enough pressure on the right people. If you stand on business and you do not have to capitulate to them, Kai Cenat said no. He said, I'm not going on anybody's stream. And he could have changed the election. And he said no. And tell me I'm wrong. Tell me I don't know what I'm talking about.
I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what you're talking about.
You don't know what you're talking about, because that doesn't go to my. If Donald Trump set his sights on a particular YouTube, because first of all, I don't care how many millions of views they got. They don't nearly have the resources or the deep pockets that these huge corporations have. And it wouldn't take much to break them down to the last compound and get rid of them.
One lawsuit.
If Donald Trump decided that he wanted to do that because he didn't like what they were saying. So I'm not going to disagree with you about the changing landscape of media and the popularity of influencers and YouTube and the decline of traditional TV and cable and all of that. All of that is just a product, again, as I've said, of the market, people's changing tastes, their time, and how they interact, right? That has more to do with it than anything. And the fact that celebrities and certain people have began to understand that they no longer have to work through the gatekeepers to get their messages out, right? They can start their own podcast, they can talk amongst each other. But again, you got to recognize that these folks are not trained journalists. As much as I like watching Cam Newton do interviews, every time I watch Cam Newton do an interview, I cringe because he's not a trained journalist. So he don't know how to ask follow-up questions, even sometimes when people give him good content. Same thing with Shannon Sharp. They're good, but they're not journalists. They leave a lot of meat on the table. And as a trained journalist who's watching this stuff, I see the content that they provide is entertaining, is good, but it's not journalism. And that is the danger of falling too much in love with these podcasters and influencers who are not trained journalists, right? Who know about the job, who understand the First Amendment, who understand the laws, how they can get information and what they can. So I'm not saying that it doesn't have its place in our ecosystem of information and education. It absolutely does. But for those who are cheering for the day that the New York Timeses of the world and the ABC News, be careful what you ask for.
They're fools.
Be careful what you ask for.
They're fools. Anybody cheering for the end.
You're cheering it now, but you won't be later on down the line.
Anybody cheering for the end of traditional journalism, you're basically putting nails in your own coffin.
Well, but guys, just to clarify, I get that point, journalism versus entertainment, but correct me if I'm wrong, the main point isn't that. The main point is making sure the government doesn't interfere with speech. I don't care if it's a journalist or if it's an entertainer. Do you guys agree?
Absolutely.
Okay, but if you're a streamer, they can't interfere with you
legally
as much as if you're on mainstream media. Just okay, right now, if we started a radio station, we could start an online radio station and play whatever we want to, unregulated. We could start an online streaming radio station right now. We could do it for $35 a month. If you started a regular radio station and you have to go through the airwaves and get an FCC regulated and get go through a K or W or get a call letters, there's a completely different process.
It is different, but let me
those things are governed completely different.
They are, and we know that.
Unregulated. So the unregulated is having a stronger, more
it is regulated, but that's where you're wrong,
than the mainstream media.
It is regulated.
It's regulated by the distributor, like the YouTubes and the TikToks.
It is regulated, Tarris.
Regulated by the FCC.
Did you not see when all of the big tech companies, the head of all the social media companies, was sitting at the White House kissing Donald Trump's butt? Do you not understand that TikTok is about to be bought by Larry Ellison, and now we're hearing about Rupert Murdoch? Just like that, with a phone call, they can say, "Take the stream down, throttle it." Just like that. And there is no FCC to regulate or do anything about it.
When Donald Trump got taken off of Twitter, same thing. They said
that was a private. That wasn't government.
It's the same. It's what I'm saying.
You're right. It is the same.
These streams are private. People can't touch them like the FCC. Like I
just
cannot go back
argued
to
against your own argument,
I
Tarris.
cannot go back
Listen
to
to
a
what
same
you're
thing.
saying.
If you start a radio station and you go through the proper channels of going through the FCC and getting a call letter, you're going to have certain restrictions that you have to go through and certain guidelines. If you and I started a radio station right now and streamed it and called it whatever we wanted to,
where are you going to put it at?
We could put it wherever we want to. We could put it where? We could start it on. We could start it on. There's a tons of streaming apps that.
But where are you going to start it, and where are you going to share it to?
You can share it to whoever you. That's how did all these streamers start?
No, but tell me the platform that you're going to share it to, like Facebook, because Zuckerberg is in Trump's pocket right now because he's got a lot of lawsuits and he wants to make sure the government doesn't regulate him. So he's going to do whatever Donald Trump says. If you put it on X, you already know Elon Musk is going to do whatever Trump says. If you put it on Google, the head of Google was right at that meeting at the White House. He's going to do whatever Trump says. TikTok is about to be owned by the Ellison family. They are big Trump supporters. They're going to do whatever Trump says. Where are you going to put it at? Where you going to put it at?
Great point, Nathan.
They're afraid of doing something that they did.
Tarris has this idea, this mythical distribution platform that's unregulated, that don't have to run past any of the big guns to get broad distribution. I don't know what what fantasy land this is. Tarris envisions this distribution network, but that goes to my larger point, is that once you get so far on anything, you're going to run up against one of these big dog corporations, the 1%ers that own it. Why? Because they own everything.
Do you guys know about the suit that Trump filed against Bill Maher? Do you guys know about the lawsuit Trump filed against Bill Maher a couple years ago? Do you know what it was about? Because Bill Maher made a joke about, he had a picture of a red-haired gorilla. And he said, I'd like to know, was Donald Trump a product of this line? Okay, of this line. All right, now, Trump sued him for whatever, $500 billion. But here's the point, and I think both Nathan and Kevin said this. Bill Maher can defend that lawsuit. Okay, he went to court. Of course, they threw it out. But guys like us, if he sues us for something, even if it's a total bullshit suit, we can't afford the attorneys. So Trump does that for a reason. Okay, he files these lawsuits knowing that, with the ABCs and those, he does that knowing that they have to pay up because they want to merge. But when and if he starts going after guys like us, which wouldn't surprise me if he does, we're out of luck because we can't afford the attorneys. We can't afford to fight it.
99.9% of people who are content creators will not be able to even afford to get a lawyer to defend themselves. 99% of them. You are done with the first lawsuit. And that's what you got to understand, Tarris. Like I said, here it is right here. All these people are on all of the social media and tech companies. Google. Now, Elon Musk wasn't there. Amazon, Facebook, you name it. They're all there. So if Donald Trump or his team makes a phone call and they say, you know what, Tarris just said something we don't like, you're done. Who you gonna turn to? Who's gonna help you?
And Nathan,
nobody.
Just imagine if this mythical platform that was created from scratch and grew to that, whoever created and owned it would be sitting at that table eventually. Exactly. Right? They're gonna be sitting at that table. And this is the undeniable thing, unfortunately, about this country, is that the 1% controls, owns, and runs just about everything. You can float under the radar, Tarris, when ain't nobody watching you. So you got a whole lot of you got a whole lot of little small somebodies, content creators who are out here, and they're flying under the radar. They're flying under the radar right now because you ain't developed a blip big enough to pay attention to. But trust me, if you ever do get to that point, people gonna start paying attention to you, and the conversations do get different.
How is what you just said any different from me saying that the reason why Jimmy Fallon or Jimmy Kimmel and Donald Trump are going at each other is because they're both in that 1%? I just said that, and y'all said, "Oh, you're crazy," but you just said the same thing. The reason why Jimmy Kimmel and he's paying attention to Jimmy Kimmel, and I agree, he bruised Donald Trump's fragile ego, so that's why he's going after him. He's not good. And you guys try to present the argument that Donald Trump could come after us. We're not even. I was making the same argument you just said. Jimmy Kimmel is a 1%er like Donald Trump. As far as like when you use the FCC in the mainstream media, you get the bigger chunk of attention. But that doesn't take anything away from all the other streamers that he's not paying attention to.
Because you're small and insignificant. It's just like this show. He ain't worried about us. We don't mean nothing to Donald Trump. But think about this. Remember back when Elon Musk split with Donald Trump, and there was a war that happened on X. What did Elon start doing? He started shadow banning people. He started people like Laura Loomer and others. People were like, wait a minute, what happened to my followers? I'm not getting reach and distribution. Just like that, he made a decision that cut whatever they had built on X out just like that because he said so. And nobody was coming to do anything about it. So you think that won't happen because you start a radio station? Like Kevin said, the oligarchs around the table run and control all of the tech.
But I believe that there's if you do things with good integrity, and like I was mentioning, but let me finish. Like good integrity, like good programming, like before, like Johnny Carson back in the day, Casey Kasem, all the Soul Train, where they would have all this different divergency, like what we're doing. I don't believe that if you have divergent points on there that you're going to get canceled. I think when you go too far right or too far left, or you get caught in one of these upper echelon pissing contests. But as long for the overwhelming majority that do the right thing, that have different viewpoints and good viewership, and don't get into too much stink, you'll be all right.
Yeah. I have never heard a Democrat president ever say that they wanted to challenge the license of Fox News. I've never heard anybody ever say. I never heard Obama say that, Biden. I never heard any Democrat president ever say anything about taking or challenging the license of Fox News because of Greg Gutfeld or the Five, or because they're too right-wing and they're not divergent. What are you talking about? We shouldn't lose our rights because we changed administrations.
I agree with that. I mean,
can I share one thing, guys? I got to jump off in a couple minutes, but I think I've talked about this before, but you guys know about the Viktor Orban situation in Hungary. He was elected democratically, but there is no free speech now. Do you know why? Because all of his rich friends bought out the media. That's why there is no longer any opposition media. And Nathan was talking about Larry Ellison. Are you aware that this big merger, the one, I'm not talking about TikTok now, the big merger that Brendan Carr was using to threaten Jimmy Kimmel, ultimately, if and when that happens, Larry Ellison's son is going to run that media company, okay? This is the Orban playbook. And believe me, Trump is well aware of it because he loves Orban. Basically, what's happening is they're going to, all those guys that you guys were just talking about, the oligarchs, whatever, they will buy up. And just like Larry Ellison is, they will buy up enough of the media so there is no opposition media. That's what Trump is trying to do.
There's a comment in here I would like you to highlight. John Friera, he said, Tarris, let's prove Kevin wrong by scaling up beyond the stage live to the largest privately owned broadcast network, grassroots for music. I believe that the tech and broadcast can be regained by the people, especially in the era of AI, trustworthy news station. Hey, John, I'm going to hit you up because I believe the same thing. I believe that we can start a radio station and get as much programming as we can get, and we can change. We have the power to change this podcast. Hot Mic Podcast has shown me in a year what we have the power to do. We are the controllers of this. Donald Trump is only going to be in office for 3 more years. And if we can help change the trajectory of what media goes in, that's what I'm saying. Every time another mainstream media oligarch goes down, I'm like, good. Another one bites the dust because that makes room for grassroots. And because grassroots is what it's going to be. The grassroots is what it's going to be. It's going to spread media out more. And I understand why the powers that be want to keep the parameters on things, but I believe that there's going to be a resurgence in grassroots. I really do.
So here's the challenge, and I think that would be a beautiful thing for that to happen. If you can create something that is totally funded by the people, absent of any sort of government contract or dependent on any kind of government funding or money whatsoever, you're not going to be able to escape regulation. That's just not a reasonable thing. But you would have to have something that was totally funded by the people, absent government money, and then have people in charge of that who have the principle to resist when the Elon Musks and the others invariably come along when you grow and throw more money at the people who are in your position and in your board, that they will resist that. And then you have to trust that that will survive you after you die, and the people that you leave it to have the same principles that you have, not to sell out the big corporate interests. I've never seen it, but we can always dream.
Dream
Yeah,
or be a
sounds
part,
good.
we can be a part of it too.
I like the way it sounds, man. Listen, I like it, but I also have to be real about the changing landscape of ownership and what I see happening in front of us. So, but I'm all about being hopeful, man. Yeah, I mean, what else you gonna do? Not try? You got to give it a try. But with that, I know Phil's got to jump off, and we've been on for a while now, so we can go ahead and wrap up the show. And to the audience, really appreciate you being here today. It means everything to us. Please share the show, because I'm sure most of the people that you're connected with on social haven't seen it. Really appreciate that. Phil, Tarris, Kevin, and to Raven, who had to jump off. Appreciate her today as well. Thank you guys, and we'll be back on Friday, 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
Hey, can I speak with y'all after this?
Sure. Yep. Thanks, everybody.